Welcome back. Glad you're still with me. As promised, first I want to make sure whether we all understand how real estate commissions work, or at least how they used to work before August 17th of this year. Why am I talking about that date? Because the terms of the settlement I spoke of in part one go into effect on that date. And then the final hearing is currently scheduled for later November. Some things may change after that. We're not really sure yet. I don't know the hows, the whens, the why of realtors working on commission rather than salary or an hourly rate or fee for service or any other compensation system. But commission is usually what it is in this country and has been for as long as anyone remembers. It's now time to bust the second myth. What I saw reported wrongly over and over and over again on NPR, the New York Times, and Axios, the Wall Street Journal, and Network News is that it is agents who get paid commission when a house is sold, both the seller's agent and the buyer's agent. And frankly, many of those media accounts that I was experiencing seemed to ignore the buyer representation altogether. They were making it seem as if the seller's agent earned all of that commission. We'll call that a little baby myth to bust. Because both agents, or as we say, sides, do eventually earn some compensation. Eventually. But let's dig down. So you understand where the money in a residential sales transaction has traditionally come from and where it goes. Think of it as a funnel. Buyers, usually through a mortgage, in which case technically the bank or the financial institution is actually buying the property, but sometimes in a cash transaction, give an agreed upon amount of money to the sellers. This is the sales price. It goes in the top of the funnel. And whether it was comprised of all cash or a combination of earnest money, a cash down payment, and a loan from a lender, it all goes in to the top of the funnel. But before that, and not yet in the funnel, the earnest money the buyer paid at the beginning of the contingency period had been in an escrow account, held usually by the seller's brokerage, sometimes by the buyer's brokerage, and occasionally by the seller's attorney or an escrow company. At closing, that money starts trickling through the funnel. It's deducted from the amount the buyer needs to bring to the table because they already paid it. It's a credit for them. To that, they add the amount they've agreed to make as a down payment, and which might even get added to or even covered outright by a lending program, for example, for special groups, certain kinds of buyers, such as veterans. And then, unless it's a cash offer, the lender wires the rest of the balance to the title company. In a cash offer, the buyer's bank wires the entire balance owed from their own bank or financial institution. The title company then subtracts closing costs for each side, which for the seller likely include or might include paying any back taxes owed, the transfer taxes, title insurance, their own attorney's fees, etc. For the buyer, there will be many small fees as part of the loan if they're getting one, also their attorney fee and recording the deed. A sizable deduction from the total sales price is the commission the sellers agreed to pay to their own brokerage, not to their agent, to their own brokerage. This is so important to understand that I am going to bust that myth again. That commission goes to the agents. That's a myth. It does eventually, but it is filtered through a few steps first. So if you're with me so far, traditionally, the price of the property was paid by the buyers, either solely or most likely through a mortgage, to the sellers. Sellers understand that what they net on the sales price is affected by paying various closing costs, including a negotiated amount to the brokerage who listed their property, with the understanding that that percentage would be shared at some negotiable and proportional amount, but don't assume it's 50-50, to the buyer's brokerage. We in the industry call this cooperating commission. It's also known as the co-op for short. And this is what is changing after August 17th, and this is what I will address in detail in video 4. So then, the seller's brokerage has that money now in the middle of the funnel, and they've traditionally given some portion of that negotiated commission that they agreed to pay, and which sub percentage was publicized to all agents, though not the public, in the multiple listing service ahead of time, publicized ahead of time. They give it to the buyer's brokerage. Note, not the buyer's agent. So now it's moving down the funnel to about here. Let's look at that funnel right now. You may have noticed that no agent has earned any money yet, despite what is likely hours and hours over perhaps months and months of work on behalf of their respective clients. That's because each agent gets a split, a percentage of the commission that their respective brokerage made on the sale. Agents have their own compensation agreements with their own brokerages. The co-op commission that was publicized in the multiple listing service did not show what each agent would net on the sale, nor the total commission divided by the two brokerages. It showed only the percentage that the sellers were offering the buyer's brokerage. This was utterly transparent, and it served to market the seller's home, which is why the seller hired a brokerage in the first place. After all, unless you want to sell by owner, you understand the value of having your own agent market your property to other agents who are representing buyers, the entire point of any multiple listing service. So that's the way it's been for almost 30 years. That's how the money before August 17th finally trickles through the funnel down to the agents. A super brief history lesson. Did you know that before 1995, there were no buyer's agents at all? Buyers had no one representing their fiduciary interest or any other kind because they were considered sub-agents of the seller's agent, all supposedly working together to help the client sell the property. After the Federal Trade Commission released a study showing that most buyers were unaware of this, they thought that they actually were being represented. States passed laws that required agents to disclose whom they represented. Buyer agency grew out of a legitimate need and demand by consumer advocates. So toward the end of 1994, Illinois license law was changed to go into effect January 1st, 1995. From then on, each party in a real estate transaction had its own representation. Whether the agent was representing the buyer or the seller, their duties were the same: to represent their own client's interest as robustly as possible, including with utmost confidentiality about the client's financial position. Stay tuned for video 3, when I will summarize where we are now and how we got there.